It's Friday. It's time for our national town hall meeting, Brunch with Bernie, with Senator Bernie Sanders. And Senator, welcome.
Good to be with you, Tom.
Great to have you. I saw a news story yesterday, I believe it was, that Harry Reid has essentially created a leadership position for Elizabeth Warren in the party. And I know that you're looking at the possibility of some expansion of your responsibilities in the Senate. Could it be that the Chuck Schumer, Harry Reid kind of inside leadership of the Democratic Party is waking up to the fact that all the progressive ballot measures won and all the conservative and a few progressive candidates like Gary Peters won and Chuck and Jeff Merkley and whatnot, and that all the conservatives lost?
Well, I think there is some truth to what you say. In terms of seniority, I am in line to become ranking member of the Budget Committee, which is a very significant committee that has jurisdiction over the entire budget of the United States of America. And that's a big deal. I'm giving serious thought to taking that position. I'm now chairman of the Veterans Committee, and I'm losing that position with the transition in the Senate to Republican leadership. But I think there is an understanding that it is terribly important that Congress makes contact and begins to unite with progressives all over this country who are fighting the good fight. And I think, as you've mentioned earlier, what we have seen is in at least 5 states, voters voting to raise the minimum wage. You've seen voters voting to mandate that workers get sick leave. And I think on issue after issue, the American people are far ahead of where the Congress is. And I think it speaks to the need of the Democratic leadership to start putting up people in positions of power who can reflect what tens of millions of Americans want, and that is they want the government to start standing up for working families, and folks throughout America, in 50 states throughout this country, want to see their views reflected in the Democratic Party leadership, and they want to see a closer unity between what goes on in Washington and what goes on back in their districts and in their states. The irony of our time is that on virtually all of the important issues, the American people want government to act on their behalf and are progressive, whether it is the issue of cutting or expanding Social Security. The Republicans are going to come up with an agenda, Tom, which will move toward cut Social Security benefits. You know what the American people want? They want to see those benefits expanded because they know, on average, people are trying to get by on $14,000, $15,000 a year Social Security. It's not enough. They want to raise the cap that now exists. So the American people are way ahead of Congress. Yeah. And it's important that we have leadership in Washington starting to reflect the needs of the American people in terms of jobs. The American people are very clear. They understand that most of the new jobs that are being created are part-time and low-wage jobs. And they want the federal government to be out there creating decent-paying jobs, rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, transforming our energy system. And again, they want leadership in Washington to be fighting for ideas that the American people support. So to answer your question, yeah, I think there is an understanding that there's something very, very wrong where almost 2/3 of the American people did not show up on Election Day, did not vote, where some 75-80% of low-income workers do not vote. And what is very clear is the American people are disgusted with what is going on in Washington. They are hurting, and they want change. You know, it's a funny thing, Tom. The president tries to make a point which is valid, and he says to the American people, we are better off today than we were 6 years ago after the Wall Street fiasco and the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. And he's right in terms of job creation, in terms of the deficit, in terms of, 2 wars being fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. We are, in fact, better off. But on the other hand, compared to where we were 35 years ago, we are worse off. And today you have, since the year 1999, median family income has gone down by $5,000. So It's not good enough to say that we're better off than we were 6 years ago when Bush left office. What we have to ask ourselves is how, with all of the increases in productivity we have seen, that today the average male worker is making $800 less in inflation accounted for dollars than he did 41 years ago. The average woman worker is making significantly less than she made in 2007. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty in the industrialized world. So it's not good enough to say that we're better off than we were 6 years ago. The truth of the matter is tens of millions of workers are working longer hours for low wages, and almost all of the new income, 95% of new income, goes to the top 1%. Why does that happen? How do we change it? And clearly we need leadership in Washington to talk about those issues.
Yeah, and what's so astonishing is that all of these Democrats who lost in the last election, both House and Senate, I to the best of my knowledge, not a single one of them just went through the list you just went through.
Well, I know. And, it's a catch-22 situation. What ends up happening is that because of all of this right-wing money coming into the political campaigns as a result of Citizens United, as a result of Fox TV and right-wing talk radio, we have a nation which has not heard a different point of view. And then you have these candidates who are saying, my God, if I say this, no one's going to believe me or I'll lose. I've got to become more conservative. And that only moves the whole country, continues to move the whole country, accelerates the movement to the right. What we need desperately right now, and why I so much appreciate what you do, Tom, and the other handful of great talk show hosts that we have, is we need to explain to the American people, discuss with the American people why the middle class is disappearing and why the gap between the very, very rich and everybody else is growing wider. But you have many states where no one even hears these issues. And so you have candidates who are timid. They're going to talk about gun control. They're going to talk about Keystone Pipeline and all kinds of other stuff, and they run away from the issues that are most important to the American people. But what gives me some confidence in the midst of a fairly dismal economic and political moment in American history is that on all of the issues, the need to raise the minimum wage, the need for pay equity for women workers, the need to create millions of jobs by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, the need to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy, the need to change our trade policy. You and I have talked about this time and time again, but you don't see this discussion on television or on most radio shows. We have a trade policy which encourages corporations to shut down in America, go to China, and bring those products back into America. We need to change that. We need to deal with Citizens United, this disastrous Supreme Court decision that allows the Koch brothers and other billionaires to spend as much as they want on campaigns. So on all of these important issues, the very good news is the American people are with us. The bad news is, for 100 different reasons, they end up voting for the candidates who are opposed to everything that they believe in. And we got to figure that one out. Clearly, to my mind, what we have got to do is fight for a progressive agenda which resonates with the American people. And I think when we do that, we're going to be just fine politically.
There you go. Senator Bernie Sanders with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. The senator will be taking your calls right after this break. Be sure to check out his website, sanders.senate.gov. He's also got a very, very active Facebook page. Just go over to Facebook and plug in Senator Sanders or Bernie Sanders. And his Twitter is @SenatorSanders. We will be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
The lines are already totally slammed. You're up next to talk with Bernie. Stick around. And welcome back. Woody in Litchfield Park, Arizona. You are on the air with Senator Sanders. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Network.
Oh, well, thank you. And again, it's an honor to get on your show and to talk to Senator Sanders. I'm supposed to have a question, and that's, how do we get the working man to know that Congress can work for them? And I've got a couple of proposals, and you were just highlighting some of them that we've talked about before, reinstituting the WPA and the CCC. Tom and I have talked about eliminating the wages as income on the tax structure, and let the income people fight the income people. Let the wage earner pay for Social Security and Medicare. And then the third one is mortgage relief, true mortgage relief. The Hamp and Hart program are helping the hedge fund managers much more than the homeowners. Let the homeowner buy his own mortgage at whatever discounted rate. As you know, Lehman Brothers sold theirs for as low as 22 cents on the dollar. But again, I applaud you, and I really encourage you to run for Congress. I know people want you to run for the presidency, but we need a Congress, as you were just highlighting, to give us the laws that we.
He's a senator, Woody. He's already.
I know, but that's where again we need that continued support in the Congress.
Stay in the Senate.
To keep this
Okay.
thing going.
Thank you, Woody. And Senator, his second point was that we start charging FICA on capital gains.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I think that that's an idea that we definitely should look at.
Yeah.
Let me just pick up on Woody's point. I think for many, many reasons, the American people look at Washington, they see nothing is happening. And, they say, why should I waste my time voting? Why should I give credibility to an institution which is not credible, which is owned by big money interest and not working on my behalf? And what Woody is saying, and he's given some examples, and I agree with what he said, and we can give a dozen others, is what the American people want to see now is not more press conferences, not more hot air, not more talk. They want to see action. And I will say that the one point that Woody made, and I certainly agree with, and it would be dramatic, is that when you have real unemployment at close to 12%, and that includes people working part-time when they want to work full-time and people who have given up looking for work, there is article after article out there that many of the new jobs being created are part-time jobs when people need to work 40 hours a week to make enough to take care of their families. If we could put $1 trillion into rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, and $1 trillion is one-third of what we spent on the war in Iraq, a war we never should have gotten into. Tom, if we can put one-third of that, $1 trillion, to do what Woody said, you don't have to call it a WPA. I mean, this is just investing in our infrastructure. You can do it in many, many ways. But you can create something like 13 million jobs. And when you do that, when you rebuild, imagine what America would look like if all over this country, in 50 states in this country, people were out there improving our roads, that people were driving on roads which were really good quality roads rather than full of potholes, safe roads. If we had bridges that were not unpassable, that we couldn't use, but they were modern, new bridges. If you had a rail system which was equal or better than Europe or Japan. If you had water systems and wastewater plants that were cutting edge and modern. We do all of those things. We improve America, make us more productive, and create, with $1 trillion in investment, 13 million jobs. No, I certainly agree with Woody. That would be dramatic. That would be real. And that's what we've got to do, in addition, of course, to raising the minimum wage, living wage.
Yep.
On April 15, 1949, Pacifica Radio KPFA 94.1 FM, Berkeley, California, went on the air for the first time, introducing listener-sponsored community radio to America. James Baldwin was a prominent and prolific novelist, essayist, and playwright.
The psychology, the sense of reality, which allows any policeman to treat almost any citizen, but particularly any citizen suspected of being odd, strange, hard to handle, as his inferior.
to our national town hall meeting with Senator Bernie Sanders, the man I think of as America's senator, although the good citizens of Vermont know who he works for, and they're very proud of him. I lived there for 10 years. I know this from firsthand experience. Senator, ready to take some phone calls?
Let's do it.
Okay. Florence in Tenino, Washington. You are on the air, Senator Sanders.
Oh, hi. Hello. Today is the Post Office Union's National Day of Action to stop delaying America's mail. And I'm putting a petition on change.org today to say, President Obama, please appoint people who support the post office to its board of governors. I'm wondering if you'd be able to sign, Senator, and ask your supporters to sign my petition.
Well, I certainly support your petition. I personally kind of stay away from petitions myself. But it's important that we understand, and I thank you, Florence, for what you're doing. The Postal Service is one of the important institutions in our country in terms of our economy and in terms of providing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of decent-paying jobs to American workers, including many veterans who work for the Postal Service. And let me just repeat what I've said many, many times. Every time you open up the paper and they talk about the finances of the Postal Service, they talk about the Postal Service losing billions of dollars a year. What everybody should understand is that in terms of their operating budget, the Postal Service actually makes money. This year, I believe in the last year, they made something like $200 million. Not a lot of money, but it's a small profit. The reason they're in the red is because of this onerous legislation passed during the Bush administration, which requires the United States Postal Service to do what no other entity in the United States, in government, private sector, anywhere, or in the world does, and that is come up with 75 years of future retiree health care benefits in a 10-year period, costing about $5.5 billion every single year. So that's why they are in deficit, strictly because of that. If you eliminate that onerous requirement, they are actually making a profit. And in my view, what we have to do is give them the tools to make even more money and to be even more relevant here in the 21st century. So, Florence, I very much appreciate what you're doing. We have worked with all of the unions in trying to strengthen the Postal Service, see it grow. We are vigorously opposed and hope to do something in the next couple of weeks to prevent the closure of 82 processing plants around the country, which will only slow mail delivery and result in the loss of some 15,000 jobs.
Wow. Michelle in Los Angeles, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yes, thank you, Thom Hartmann and Senator Sanders. I saw online that the lame duck calendar for the Senate is essentially the same as the House. I'm really confused. Why can't Senator Reid extend the calendar to get as many judges, ambassadors, cabinet members approved that the Republicans have been blocking all this time? I mean, you got so much done in the lame duck in 2010. Why can't you do more?
Well, Michelle, I think that is certainly one of the goals. And I don't know how many, as you well know, and your point is right on, the Republicans have obstructed the ability of the president to get his nominees through, whether it's judges or administrative appointees. And you're absolutely right. We've got to do everything that we can to accelerate that progress. And sometimes you could do it en bloc if you have agreements. I'm not quite sure what the level of agreement is, but you're right. We should use this opportunity, the remaining few months that we have, to get all of these appointees through.
Ellen in Northampton, Mass. You're on the air with Senator Sanders. We have about a minute and a half to the break, Ellen, so if you can make it quick.
I want to ask Senator Sanders, first thank both of you for being on. Senator Sanders, what would it take for you to accept the budget chairship? Because I beg you to do that. And second, if you did do that, could you bring a wider knowledge of the Post Office $75 billion retirement fund to a wide audience in the United States so average people understand why that's happening?
Well, Ellen, unfortunately, I will not become chair of the Budget Committee. The Republicans will control the House. I would be ranking member, and it is something I'm giving thought to. Final decisions have not been made, but I am giving, thought. Right now I'm very proud to be the chairman of the Veterans Committee. I love that job, and it's important work. But if the budget ranking position opens up, I will give serious thought to that. And you're right. The Budget Committee allows an opportunity to discuss the priorities of this country, Postal Service being one of the important ones. It looks at taxes. How do we raise revenue? Is it acceptable that 1 out of 4 large corporations pay nothing in federal taxes? Is it a good idea, as the Republicans want, to end Medicare as we know it and turn it into a voucher program or make massive cuts in Medicaid or voucher or nutrition programs? So I agree with you, Ellen. The Budget Committee is an interesting committee. I've been on it since I have been in the Senate, and we are looking at our options in terms of the ranking position on it.
And just so for people who don't know what that means, the ranking member is basically the number 2 guy on the committee, right?
Well, not really. It's the leader of the opposition. The Republicans have the majority, will have the majority, as the Democrats do right now. Patty Murray is now the chair. I work with Patty.
Right.
But if she moves on, that top position on the Democratic side will be open.
I see. Okay, thank you. Senator Bernie Sanders with us. We'll be back with more of your questions for Bernie in our National Town Hall meeting, Brunch with Bernie.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
And be sure to check out Senator Sanders' website, sanders.senate.gov, and you can plug Bernie Sanders into Facebook, and you will see a lot of activity. It's Talk Media for the rest of us, the Thom Hartmann Program for the sane among us. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders taking your calls in our National Town Hall meeting. And, Senator, I see you're back with us, right?
Yep, right.
Okay. Tate in Asheville, North Carolina. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Delighted to be with y'all. I just ran against Patrick McHenry for the U.S. House for North Carolina's 10th District on the platform that you guys have been espousing. And despite not having much name recognition out of Buncombe County, we garnered almost 86,000 votes.
Wow.
And I think that
Good on you.
And the question I have for the senator is, what can we do to have state leadership across the country with the party embrace these ideals and these goals as far as pay equity, living wages, our environment, et cetera, education?
Well, I think the first thing that has to happen is the Democratic leadership has got to do what my fellow Vermonter, Howard Dean, said years ago when he was chairman of the DNC, and that is develop a 50-state strategy. What I think is not acceptable is large parts of this country have virtually no progressive presence at all, none, zero, and that is unacceptable. The second point that I would make is that we need to encourage grassroots activism and create a much closer tie between grassroots America and Washington, D.C. Politicians have got to be held accountable. You can't have simply a situation where some billionaires decide they want to run for office and that's about it. We need to raise public consciousness. We need to get people involved. We need people to stand up and fight for their rights, and they need to demand that people in Washington stand with them. I'll give you an example of this. Just yesterday, there is right now a strike in the Washington, D.C. area with federal contract workers. These are people who work for employers who contract with the federal government for products or for space. And we made some progress in increasing their wages, but we have a long way to go. They're on strike right now. And they were out there on Capitol Hill doing the right thing, fighting for workers' rights, fighting for dignity, fighting for decent wages. And they came to Washington. And we need to have politicians walking on the picket line with them, standing and fighting with them, to understand that there are people who are on their side. If we don't do that, then I think the gap between politics and the real world will get wider and wider.
Helen in Ithaca, New York. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Oh, hi. Happy afternoon to both of you, Senator Sanders and Mr. Thom Hartmann. I met you in Ithaca, by the way, from here. But anyhow, who cares about that?
Well, thank you.
I wanted to say three things real quick, and the first thing you might think is silly. So now that Elizabeth Warren has this new function that she's supposed to perform as a senator, can we have, like, this is a silly part, a contest let's come up with a distinguished title to provide her, with for what she's doing. I know she's supposed to be interacting with progressive movements or something, but we got to come up with something good. All right, that's the silly thing I'm saying. Second thing is, I would love to see a ticket, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren at 2016. So we'll see about that. And the other thing is the progression. What is it? No, sorry. Presidential Medal of Freedom is going to be physically awarded, I think, like November 24th or something. But it was announced the other day, and there were so many progressives that were on that. I was kind of amazed at Obama because he's disappointed, or not really disappointed, anyhow. So I was wondering if Bernie Sanders wanted to comment on any of this stuff.
Okay. Well, I think, I'm not sure what Elizabeth's title is, and I honestly don't know that the title means all that much, but as Tom indicated at the beginning of the show, I think it's an indication on the part of the Democratic leadership that there is an appreciation that there are millions and millions of Americans who want the government to start standing up to the billionaire class, start standing up to Wall Street, start fighting for our kids so they can get an affordable college education and not leave school deeply in debt. And Elizabeth has been in the forefront of all of those struggles, and I think it's a recognition that we need people in leadership in Washington and the Democratic Party who are responding to what the American people want. I think that's a good thing. So Helen, I don't worry too much about what her title is. Elizabeth, whatever the title is, will do a good job. In terms of the presidential race, what I have said on many occasions is it is something that I am thinking about, and I'm getting around the country. And the question for me is, it is a huge undertaking. It's a big undertaking to run for a U.S. Senate from a state of Vermont. That's a big undertaking. But this is, many, many times more complicated, more difficult. You have to raise ungodly sums of money, and you have to take on, in my case, we'll be taking on the billionaire class, which is not only the Koch brothers, it's Wall Street, it's the private insurance industry, it's the drug companies, it's the military-industrial complex. You're taking them all on. And whether there is an appetite at grassroots level across this country to get engaged in that fight, I have to ascertain that. I don't want to go forward if there is not the kind of grassroots support that would be necessary to mount a very, very effective campaign. And then you got to raise, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So, that's something that some of us we're looking at right now, analyzing. And I don't know. The last point, Medal of Freedom, I don't know a whole lot about that, so I'm going to not comment on that.
Jim in Lockport, Illinois. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Senator Sanders, how are you?
I'm great.
All righty. Last week I was talking to Tom about the EPA and the Republicans probably going after that. We know our friends on the other side of the aisle, the big climate deniers.
Yes.
They won't listen to the science. But the Pentagon just released information saying that one of the greatest threats to our country is climate change itself. Now, if they don't believe the scientists, is there any way we can get the Pentagon in there to show their point of view and why climate change is a big threat to this country and why we should do something about it?
Well, Jim, that's a very thoughtful question, and you're absolutely right. And this is not a new development, by the way. Both the Pentagon and the CIA and the intelligence agencies have been telling us for years that when you talk about international instability and the likelihood of war and national security issues that impact the United States, climate change is one of the most serious problems that we face. If you're looking at parts of the world where you're going to see significant drought or flooding or mass migrations of people away from seacoast areas because of rising tides, that's going to bring just a heck of a lot of instability where you have people, large populations moving or people fighting for water, fighting for tillable land. And that's what the CIA and the Department of Defense is saying. It is a very, very sad state of affairs. It really is, where you have a major political party called the Republican Party, which is more concerned, apparently, about getting money from the Koch brothers and other fossil fuel people in big energy more concerned about their campaign donations than they are about listening to the scientific community. Because the scientific community is now virtually united, not much debate at all, that climate change is real, it is already causing devastating problems, it is caused by human activity, and if we don't turn it around, if we don't reduce carbon, it will only get worse. And that is why I am strongly opposing this Keystone Pipeline legislation, which will probably be voted on Tuesday. It has bipartisan support, virtually all the Republicans, some Democrats. I think it is a disastrous idea. I think the United States of America should not be proclaiming to the world that we are going to be transporting 800,000 barrels of filthy oil from Canada to the Gulf Coast every single day. If you do that, you really cannot get up with any credibility and talk about the seriousness of climate change and the need for the planet to do something. So I would hope very much that if it does pass the Senate, that the president vetoes it.
Milton in Lithonia, Georgia. A minute and a half to the break, Milton. A quick question for Bernie.
Yeah. Good afternoon to both of you. I know you're not a Democrat, Senator Sanders, but will the Democrats demand a 67 vote in order to get bills passed in the future, since the Republicans were demanding 60? And also, would they include things that are important, such as minimum wage increase, with these bills at the same time?
Well, Milton, I think what the Democrats are going to have to do is think through how they can be most effective in the opposition. They're not going to be the opposition party. And my hope is that working with the President of the United States, we make it very, very clear that we are not going to support as the Republicans will want. Let's be clear. This is what their agenda will be. Mark my words. They want cuts in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, nutrition, and education. They do not want to raise the minimum wage. They do not want pay equity for women workers. They do not want to move forward in terms of energy efficiency and sustainable energy and break our dependence on fossil fuel. So what the president has got to do, and what we have got to be supportive of, is to tell the Republicans, yes, there are areas where we can and should work together, no question about it. But then on the key issues affecting the working class of this country and the future of the planet environmentally, no, he is going to stand tall, and we're going to work with him and protect him.
Senator Bernie Sanders with us, taking your calls in our National Town Hall meeting, Brunch with Bernie, here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your calls for the Senator right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And visit sanders.senate.gov for Bernie's website. You can sign up for the Bernie Buzz, his newsletter. You can hop over to Facebook and check out his Facebook page, too. And welcome back. Let's see here. Bernie in Fortuna, California. You are on the air with Bernie. Bernie?
Is that Bernie?
Hey, Bernie, how are you?
Good. Nice to share a name with you. Comcast is acting up again. Lost the signal. But my question for you, Senator Sanders, is, I'm a 30-year federal employee, worked for the Forest Service as a firefighter, and so I've seen how the government has changed during those times. I started in the early days of Reagan, and it really has done a number on us. In particular, and I can go on and on about that, but in this particular example is I have an employee who was injured on the job, and the fragmented, decentralized way that we're organized makes it impossible for her to get care from Workmen's Comp, Department of Labor, Office of Workmen's Comp. And so I'd like to ask if while you're working on the Veterans Affairs, that you also look at the Workmen's Comp portion for federal employees, because the system is designed to, in many ways, the veterans were to lose paperwork and to slow it down and try to weed out as many people as they can.
Bernie, thanks. First of all, thank you very much. I understand that you're working with the fire service, and that is enormously important work, and it's dangerous work. We know we lost, I think it was 19 firefighters. Was it last year, Tom?
Yeah.
And these guys do a great job, and they put their lives on the line. And what we're seeing as a nation, because of climate change, more forest fires and more severe forest fires, and these guys are in the middle of it. So, Bernie, thank you and your crew very much for what you're doing. In terms of workman's comp and what is happening to the federal government, you are absolutely right. There has been a movement since Reagan, accelerated in recent years, to do everything possible to weaken the federal government, to privatize anything and everything that they can, and to provide less revenue for the agencies that do such important work for the American people. So workman's comp is just one area. With, as I mentioned a moment ago, we're looking at 82 processing plants being shut down for the Postal Service within the next year, something we're fighting very hard. We're going to be resisting cuts in Social Security and ending Medicare as we know it. These guys want to give every important institution in the federal government over to Wall Street or large corporations. That is their game plan. And we've got to do everything we can to oppose them. But thank you very much, Bernie, for what you and your fellow workers are doing.
Yeah. We have just 25 seconds, I think, until the break.
Well, let me just pick up on this point. What the Koch brothers and the other big money people who fund the Republican Party want is very clear. They want to take us back to the 1920s. They want to end virtually every piece of major legislation that protects working people, whether it's workman's comp or anything else. That is their game plan. And then at the end of the day, they want even more tax breaks for the wealthy and the large corporations. It's not a complicated game plan. That is really what they want. And sadly and tragically, they have made progress in recent years.
Senator Sanders will be right back with us in just a moment. It's Talk Media for the rest of us, the Thom Hartmann Program. Welcome back. It's our Brunch at Bernie Hour. Senator Bernie Sanders taking your calls. And Deborah in
Tunkhannock.
Thank you, Pennsylvania. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Thom Hartmann. Thank you for taking my call. I love your show. Thank you for doing your work. Senator Sanders, this is one of the great honors of my life to speak with you. I'm a university professor of literature, and we talk about life in my classes on a daily basis. Politics often comes up, and I frequently tell my students there's only one person in government that I know for sure always tells the truth, no matter what's going on or who is involved, and that's Senator Bernie Sanders. My question for you, first of all, I should thank you so much for what you do. But my question for you is, I'm so pleased that you have said that you'd be willing to run for president. If you ran and you won, what would be some of the first things that you would do as president?
Well, Deborah, thank you very much for your kind words. And and let me say this: people make me nervous when they say that. The reason is you may not know their names, but trust me, there are a number of very serious and good people in the House and in the Senate who work incredibly long hours under great stress trying to do the right thing. And my name may be known by more people, but there are some good people there, and I don't want you to think otherwise. I think the first thing that, you've asked me a question that I honestly haven't thought about, but what I would do, I think the first thing, though, that comes to my mind is to address the economic crisis facing this country. And as I'm sure you know, real unemployment is much higher than official unemployment. And if we could put at least $1 trillion into rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, as I mentioned earlier. Think what 13 million new jobs in this country would mean to the American people. Think about how people would feel when they walked out of their door and they saw work going on, improving our rail system, transforming our energy system. Think what it would mean to young people to know that instead of being unemployed or working at a part-time job, they had a decent-paying job. That's number one. And second of all, think what it would mean to the entire world if we made it very clear that we are going to transform our energy system. We are going to put money, substantial money, into sustainable energy like solar and wind and geothermal and biomass and heat pumps. We could go a giant step forward in cutting carbon and creating jobs in energy efficiency and sustainable energy if we did that. And the third thing that comes to my mind is to do everything that we can to restore American democracy, which is now being undermined by this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. So we've got to figure out a way to overturn that decision. We've got to figure out a way to end this embarrassment where almost two-thirds of the American people, Deborah, did not vote on Election Day last week. How do we get young people into the political process? How do they know that their voices are being heard? So in your university, there's a lot of discussion about where we go forward rather than the apathy or the disillusionment that we're currently seeing. So those are a few of the things that I would move on very, very aggressively and very quickly.
Ben in Miami, Florida. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi. Why does Congress allow express tollways to be built on the federal interstate roads? They are built with our tax money, but only the affluent can afford to use them. And here in Florida, there's ongoing projects to build them all over the state. And it would seem like that money would be better used for mass transit or to improve the roads that everyone could use, and not just people that can afford the high toll rates.
I mean, I know what the argument is for them, but you're right. You're creating a two-tier transit system, and it almost reminds me of this issue of net neutrality, Tom, that we're dealing with every day here. So public money is going into a system, and Ben is right. If you have the money and you pay the tolls, you can move pretty quickly. If you don't have the money, you're going to go slower. And Ben's right.
Rudy in Riverside, Illinois. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yeah, Senator Sanders, why don't we have a Republican Postmaster General, Mr. Donahue, in a Democratic presidential administration?
Well, the president does not appoint directly the Postmaster General. That goes through a whole other process. In fact, there is going to be, they just announced a new Postmaster General. It's there's a postal board that makes that nomination. But having said that, Rudy, I think the president has not by any means been as strong as he should be in appointing the right people to that board or sending the right messages to the board about what he wants for the Postal Service. That's an area of disagreement that I have with the president. In my view, we need a Postmaster General who understands the potential of the Postal Service to grow, to create more jobs, not to continue to be cut. As I mentioned several times today already, we're looking at another 82 processing plants being shut down if we don't stop them, and we're going to try to stop that in the next couple of weeks, which will slow down mail service significantly. So you're right. We need the president to be a lot stronger in protecting the U.S. Postal Service and the employees in the Postal Service.
45 seconds to wrap it up, Senator.
Well, let me just conclude, Tom, by urging people, despite the very bad election that took place last week, not to give up hope. Because giving up hope and losing faith is exactly what our opponents want. We've got a tall task in front of us. There is no question about that. How you reinvigorate democracy, how we fight effectively for a declining middle class, how we deal with wealth and income inequality. These are very, very difficult issues. No question about it. But let's not forget that people have fought and died to expand democratic rights in this country, have fought and died for social justice for hundreds of years. And we have got to continue that struggle.
Senator Sanders, thanks so much for being with us again this week.
Thank you, Tom.
It is always an honor and a pleasure.